So the Jews of England are expelled in 1290. Milton
Mm,
does not grow up with any Jews, but the Jews are allowed to return during Milton's lifetime under Oliver Cromwell. Did
mm.
they take a position on this issue? Are there any writings of Milton on this position?
Well, no, there aren't. It's true to say. So Cromwell, I mean, Oliver Cromwell. One of the things that Cromwell does, and I think Cromwell's one of those figures in British history, at least, where he's a very divided reputation. Some people see him as a kind of king-killing Puritan zealot. Other people would point to occurrences like the readmission of the Jews in 1656, which Cromwell was very much in favor of, as evidence of actually quite a tolerant figure, more tolerant than certainly the stereotype of the Puritan would suggest. And I certainly think that Cromwell and those around him, like Milton, were much more favorable towards the Jews than they were to Catholics in terms of, they saw Jewishness as less of a threat to the Protestant structures of England than Catholicism. And I certainly think Milton doesn't talk about the readmission of the Jews in the 1650s. And that's not really a surprise, because when he was working for Cromwell in the 1650s, he would only really write about things he was commissioned to write about. So he didn't really write just off the cuff about anything. I mean, he was writing in defense, usually of the execution of Charles I, or in defense of Cromwell as a ruler. So it's not really a big surprise that he doesn't talk about the Jewish readmission. But in common with Cromwell and other figures in the regime, he did believe very strongly, I think, that one of the indications of the Second Coming would be the conversion of the Jews to Christianity. And there was a very strong millenarian fervor in England, brought about by the Civil War, the execution of Charles I. Many people saw this as the end times. And these unprecedented historical events must be leading towards the end times. And so I think certainly Milton is interested in the idea that readmitting the Jews or bringing the Jews back into the fold in England in the 1650s is part of the movement towards the Second Coming. It's part of the movement towards end times. And it somewhat overlaps with Jewish messianism as well, ideas about the first coming. In Jewish thought. So I think, Milton, like many, I mean, he does what he regards in many ways, I suppose he regards Jewish religion as a bit like the classics, a bit like Greek and Latin, in that he sees it as having a lot of interesting intellectual aspects to it and something that's very important for him to encounter intellectually. But that he sees it as not having the full Christian revelation, and therefore always in some way, it's not fully enlightened, and so always has to be, Jewish, just like classical and Greek and Latin literature, has to be treated carefully, and the bits and pieces taken out of it, but always seen as not fully cognizant of the Christian revelation. So I think he's somewhat divided in that respect, but I think he has his intellectual interest in Jewish achievements and the Jewish people is definitely there. But at the same time, he sees them as only not kind of fully converted yet, and that allowing, as Cromwell thought, allowing Jews back into England would eventually lead conversion. So, and that clearly is it's not exactly a liberal, tolerant position, but at the same time, it did lead to what we might regard as a more liberal policy, and the policy was not reversed, of course, under Charles II. People might have expected that policy to be reversed, but it wasn't, and so it was a major moment, I think. There always had been some Jewish merchants in London and so on, but you're right, for the most part, since the 13th century, Milton probably would hardly have encountered a Jewish person before the 1650s. And increasingly, the English Republic did, discuss and negotiate with representatives from Jewish communities around Europe. And so he may, in the 1650s, when he was working for Cromwell, then have encountered Jewish diplomats and so on.